I'm Beth Carroll. My guest is Brendaliz Santiago Narvaez, who is an associate professor in the Department of Biology at Rollins College. And what we're going to talk about is the idea of Hispanics in STEM careers. Dr. Santiago, the reason we're having this conversation is you recently wrote a guest opinion piece in the Orlando Sentinel, kind of pulling up the really disparity in the numbers of people represented in STEM fields. So, do you want to give us a thumbnail, if you will, of the situation with that underrepresentation of Hispanics in STEM?
Yeah, so when we look at the data, and again, we're getting this information from the Department of Education, as well as Pew Research, which are obviously resources that are reliable, that are looking at the current data by interviewing the population and collecting that information. And based on what we have so far, we can see that there are clear disparities with the number of Hispanics that are represented in STEM. So when we look at total number of college graduates, Hispanics are at a minority. And when we look at specifically graduates in STEM fields, Hispanics are also not represented in high numbers. So that's really the pattern that we're seeing, even though there has been some improvement. Representation of Hispanics in STEM are still pretty low.
Well, actually, I suppose we should define STEM then. You are a
Mhm.
biologist, obviously,
Yes.
but let's hear what STEM fields are.
Yep. So when we talk about STEM, the acronym STEM represents science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which are all disciplines within the sciences. So if your major, right, corresponds to any of these categories within your institution, you would be identified as a STEM major.
And so we want to talk about maybe where this underrepresentation is coming from, and therefore what are some ways to increase the representation, which I think is what you were calling for in the piece, that let's focus attention on this.
Yeah. So I can speak about the subject from my personal experience, but I know that my experience as a Latina in STEM is reflecting the experience of others. And really, there are many factors that we can think about when it comes to the reason why the numbers are so low. Okay, so one of them comes down to lack of representation. It might sound a little cliche, like I said in my article, but seeing is believing, and having someone in a professional position guiding you through your career and seeing yourself reflected in that person, having that dream job that you want, and that person having your same ethnicity or at least being part of a minoritized group inspires you to be able to achieve that. I can say that personally, that was my experience. Having female Puerto Rican professors as my mentors allowed me to visualize that future and that possibility for myself. So a lack of representation when we look at faculty, even in much larger institutions, right? There's lots of initiatives in place for DEI because we need more faculty that look like our student body, and that helps in that manner. Another factor that I would like to mention is, again, might be related to a lack of mentorship, and that is connected to the lack of representation of Hispanics in STEM fields. Having a mentor plays a huge role in not only your ability to succeed in your coursework, but also to kind of develop that determination that perhaps it may be difficult, but if you have someone there to support you and guide you, that can ultimately make the difference on whether or not you persist, or whether or not what we call the melt, right? When students sort of leave a major and they think that it's not the best fit for them, sciences are not for me, and they decide on a different career path, right? So mentorship is really important. And the last factor that I think is one of the biggest reasons why we lack this abundance of Hispanics in STEM, it comes from that idea of an opportunity gap. Think of it as running a race, and everyone else is supposed to start the race in the same spot. But when you are Hispanic and any member of a minoritized group, you are starting out the race far behind everyone else, right? And that difference, we've sort of kind of told people that it's their fault, right? You have a knowledge gap. You need to catch up. You didn't train well enough. Your education wasn't as good as others. But in the end, we should kind of switch that terminology and think about it as an opportunity gap. It's society's responsibility to make sure that we all get the same education and that it's equitable. And by considering that, then we could give everyone a fair chance of kind of starting in the same place. It is unfortunate, but when you are part of a minority group, specifically Hispanics, societal and cultural needs are very different. And the things that you're dealing with may, again, get in the way of your opportunity to pursue certain careers. And then those opportunity gaps are much greater for members of underrepresented groups.
Let's dig into a couple of the things you brought up. There's so much there.
Yeah, yeah.
But let me begin with the idea of, and I'm going to position this from an outside of Hispanic group kind of issue or focus on the problem. Why does it matter? And for my part, the reason it matters is that with a diverse workforce, a diverse education, we can make the most of diverse perspectives and
Right.
innovative ways
Right.
of looking at things and bringing in those diverse experiences, because that's going to help us with problem solving and everything
Right.
else.
Right, right. So the difference in perspective, not just in the educational side, right? Because we can get many scientists together in one room, all of them of different disciplines, and that kind of diversity is really important. But I think we need to also acknowledge that cultural, right, and ethnic differences contribute to the conversation, and that will only happen, including, right, the sciences, that will only be happening if you have diverse members in the room, right? So even though we're talking about science and STEM careers, your culture, your beliefs, right, your personal experiences that are tied to who you are and your identity are really valuable. And we shouldn't discount that and only say you're either a scientist or you're not, right? There are other factors that make you who you are, that give you the opportunity and should be considered in your ability to occupy a given space. So I think it's those perspectives that we sort of may not think they are valuable to the sciences, but they actually are, because again, those different perspectives in many ways allow us to approach a problem in different ways, which is what we need to do.
Absolutely. Well, but you kind of circling back to the
Mhm.
other issue at play,
Yeah.
it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing, that it's
Mhm.
great to have those mentors and it's great to
Mhm.
see someone like you who has that
Yeah.
same perspective, but they're not in those perspective, right? So there's this time lag of
Mhm.
getting the faces out there to
Yeah.
support those students, et cetera. So
Right. So again, you do not have to be a member of an underrepresented group or a minority as a faculty to allow students to get an idea of the different kinds of individuals that have contributed in the sciences, right? So one of the things that we encourage our faculty to do, independently of what their background is, how they identify, is the fact that in the classroom, you should bring up examples of individuals from diverse backgrounds, right? Whether you are a minority or not, that doesn't really matter, because the students should be able to see what a scientist is like. And that scientist is more than just, let's say, a Caucasian male within the role of the science community, right? So a scientist looks like many different kinds of people, and students should be able to see that. So it's more of like bringing those stories into the classroom, incorporating those stories even in textbooks, so that students acknowledge that not every single scientific discovery was done by a white man. And in fact, there are many, many exceptional, highly qualified scientists that really come from different backgrounds, and their success in the scientific community was possible because they were different. And again, being different is a good thing. I don't think we stress that enough. And that is something that our students should be able to see and learn.
it's also possible, isn't it, to be the
Mhm.
bridge to
Yes.
network that young person or that
Mhm.
young professional to someone who can be that
Yes.
role model for them.
Right, absolutely. And again, mentorship is not a role that is exclusive to the individual that shares the same background or ethnicity. Anyone can be a mentor to that student and allow them to establish those connections with the resources that will help them make the most of their career or their education. Currently, again, let's say here in my campus, we have wonderful opportunities for students to contact career and life planning, or contact faculty, even outside the disciplines that they're in, just so that they can gain a perspective on what they'd like to do and what are the options that they can consider. So again, yes, anyone can be an ally, anyone can support the idea that you can mentor a Hispanic student and any underrepresented student in their career and their education.
I would think it's also, and this is getting back to the piece you wrote where you gave these wonderful examples
Mhm.
of Hispanic astronauts,
Yeah.
but even going beyond that, and we kind of know sort of those very
Right.
visible ends of STEM, you know, the astronaut,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
engineer, but there's a whole lot of different types of professions that lead up to that end game.
yes.
You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Mhm.
So kind of exposing those young people to those possibilities as well.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I like to do as a faculty is sit down with my students and ask them, what are you passionate about? What are the things that are of value to you when it comes to your career? And also discuss with them, there are many different ways of achieving that goal, right? Of being successful in STEM. And there are many sides of STEM, right? So the end goal is not just, let's say, to be an engineer or to be a doctor. There are many other careers that you can choose that reflect your interest and what are the things that are of value to you. And I really love to emphasize those out of the box careers where you're sort of taking your skills, because your education is providing you with a set of skills, and then applying that to whatever is it that you're passionate about, whether it has to do with environmental reform, whether it has to do with policy making, whether it has to do with inventing something, spearheading a startup company, being a scientific writer. Again, there's so many careers you could choose that do not necessarily have to be those prototypical ideas of what we associate with STEM.
Yeah. You got to know it's there before you can make the journey to get to that
Mhm.
destination, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The You were saying that the education itself, you know, the knowledge base might also be something that these young people need help with.
Yeah.
So whether it be with that K through 12 schooling, et
Mhm.
cetera, what are your thoughts on how to help bridge the education gaps?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's really important for us to prioritize, right, STEM education when it comes to the resources that are allocated from the moment, right, children start in school, middle school, as well as high school. Having these programs that allow students to explore STEM early allows them to really connect with these fields and consider them, right, as a possibility, even when no one in their family has pursued that career, and even when they have never heard of them before, right? So the earlier is best. Obviously, once you get to college, there are a number of opportunities that we can also consider. One of the things we're doing here at Rollins is we are considering, right, and acknowledging that students come in with different experiences and that the opportunity gaps do exist. So, what kind of supportive network can we put in place? So, regardless of what your academic needs are, we can catch all of you and support you, right? And we do a number of things. We have revamped our entire introductory sequence for STEM courses like biology, chemistry, and physics, acknowledging that our students have different needs, but they're all in the same classroom together. So providing resources and support systems so that they can pick and choose what they need and when allows them to kind of like have ownership for what they're learning, but also get what they need depending on what their needs are. So I think considering, right, how we can make our courses diverse, equitable, and inclusive is a great way of addressing those differences.
And in fact, that was going to be one of my questions to
Mhm.
you. How are you handling this at Rollins to
Mhm.
encourage the STEM fields? But do you have like an official program as well that you're trying to put students through?
Well, there are several initiatives I would say that are happening currently. So
Mhm.
Rollins has what is called the Embark program. That program specifically creates a cohort of students from the moment they start out as freshmen. All of them identify as a minority, first gen college student. And again, you're creating this sort of cohort experience where that program is providing programming and mentorship directly for those students that have self identified as being part of those groups. That program is independent of whether you're a STEM major or not. Now, for STEM majors, we have a number of things that we're currently doing in-house. And this comes from a very wonderful grant that we received from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which is geared towards what we call inclusive excellence. So what are the things we can do to create an inclusive environment for our students? And one of the, initiatives that we're working on that I have led is the creation of what we call the STEM Hub. The STEM Hub is a space within the science building here on campus. And this space has wonderful, comfortable furniture so our students can sit down and study. They have charging stations, they have whiteboards, markers, textbooks that they can use. And basically, this is a collaborative space where students can study and work within the building so that if they need us, they just have to go up a flight of stairs and find us in our office. All of the tutoring for science classes is also happening within that space. So our students are constantly collaborating and working with their coursework. And again, they do it together. They do it with their tutors. As faculty, we can drop in from time to time. And again, we're sort of trying to create this collegial, supportive community space so that we change the culture and that our students that need the extra support feel comfortable in finding it.
Well, that might be a way to segue then into the larger community. Obviously, in
Mhm.
the piece you wrote and in speaking with me, you're hoping to reach the larger community.
Yeah.
So, what are some initiatives in the
Mhm.
community, or what are at least your basic thoughts about what we can all do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it never hurts to take the time to learn about someone different from you that is in a career choice that is also different from that of the one you've chosen, just so that you can have those narratives and those stories and kind of go back to them. Another thing that we're doing, I guess, that would involve the community here, we have social media presence, and I know that nowadays that is important because you can get information out there, and whether the person is interacting with you directly or indirectly, they may see the content and they might connect with the content, right? I also encourage people to follow, if they like social media, to follow social media accounts that follow, right? Or that are revolving around topics that are different, like women in STEM or minorities in STEM, the American Society for Microbiology, NASA, right? So there's so many social media accounts that I would encourage people to follow just so that they can get their little bit of science, but also to learn new things that perhaps might make a difference in how they communicate to others, what science is or what careers are out there. So I think we have so many resources now that we can use. It's a matter of knowing where to go.
I love nerding out to things like that. So,
Mhm, mhm.
thank you for that idea.
Yeah.
And that begs the question, we're talking about Hispanics in STEM careers,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of overflow into the STEM careers into just our lives, our
Yeah.
everyday lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was gonna say one of the ways personally that I like to give back, and that one of the ways that I use to give back to the community and to connect with the community is doing things like this, right? If you ask me for an interview, I'd be more than happy to do it because I know that someone out there will listen to it. And also, it allows me to sort of put my message out there so that people know that there are members of a Hispanic community that are representing the sciences, right? So that is something that I definitely enjoy and that I think is a great idea to pursue. And then I sort of forgot what your other question was. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just wondering about the idea that, yeah, we're talking about
Mhm.
careers, jobs,
Yeah.
but it spills out
Yeah.
into just people's regular
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I chose to work at Rollins, right? As a liberal arts college, we want our students to learn about different things because many things connect, and your life is just better for it, right? So when it comes to STEM fields and science in general, your everyday life is impacted by these fields, and there are so many things that you do every day and that you take for granted that came from somebody's idea to do something and to discover something new, right? Something as simple as and I tell this to my students, something as simple as washing your clothes with a particular kind of detergent. That detergent works because there's certain enzymes in there and that comes from microbes. And I always tell them that, right? There's some of these random connections that you can make about everyday things that you do or that you use, whether it's a product, whether it's a medication, whether it's a cleaning solution, however you'd like to think it, right? There's so many things that come from these discoveries that are the pursuit of somebody's like idea. And yeah, STEM pretty much influences every aspect of your life.
Well, thanks for talking to me today. I do want to give you an opportunity for any final thoughts or reminders for us.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm really grateful for having the opportunity to talk about this topic. And again, I encourage everyone to consider sciences as an opportunity to learn about your world, to learn about what are the things that make this planet what it is. And I really always like to tell people STEM is for everyone because STEM impacts everyone's life.
Dr. Brendaliz Santiago Narvaez is an associate professor in the Department of Biology at Rollins College. I'm Beth Perrell.